I didn't see the notification at first. My phone buzzed against the paint-splattered wooden counter where I keep the garden scissors and a cracked ceramic cup Mark made in night school 30 years ago. I was upstairs, knees protesting, tugging a moth-eaten drop cloth off a frame I hadn't touched since before he died. When I finally glanced down and woke the screen, the headline made my mouth go dry. Congratulations to the buyer of the newly discovered Parker. $1.2 million, private sale through Harbor Row Gallery. Parker, my last name, my husband's name. A painting supposedly discovered, authenticated, and sold in my own town, and they hadn't even bothered to use his first name. That's how it works when men become stories and widows become furniture. The world trims away the detail that proves you were there. The problem was, I still owned that painting. Well, what looked like it anyway. Mark used to call it November Shorelight, a small seascape he'd abandoned, face down, behind the armchair when he decided it was too sentimental. I had picked it up and tucked it in the attic, not because it was great art, but because it held a piece of him, his brush in the way the waves tipped with light, his stubbornness in the underpainting where he'd scraped back to start again. The real thing, unfinished, imperfect, was 6 feet from me, wrapped in the same drop cloth I'd just dragged across the floorboards, which meant the one that sold was a lie. The gulls screamed at the eaves as if they knew. I steadied myself on the rafters and laughed once, the old sharp laugh of a woman who has been told she must be mistaken. Then I took the cloth completely off, cradled Mark's November in my hands, and felt the fine grit of attic dust under my thumbs. The signature was there. The scumble of gray he always mixed with the slightest thread of green was there. The hairline crack and the gesso by the horizon, a flaw he used to point out with a wince, was exactly where I remembered it. Downstairs on my counter, the phone kept buzzing. I obeyed its summons the way we all do now. The gallery had posted a carousel of photos, the framed canvas, the back label, a close-up of the signature, a woman's hand in one picture, red manicure, holding the lower stretcher corner so the camera could document the nail pattern like this was the Louvre. The caption was breathless. From the estate of the late Benjamin Parker, a previously unknown early coastal work surfaces after decades. Estate, unknown, surfaces, after decades. I had to sit. My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm 68 years old, a retired public school art teacher, and the widow of a man who made beautiful things and never wanted to be called a genius. We live, or I still live, in a pale blue Victorian a block from the harbor in Breakwater, Maine, with a draft under the front door I never quite fix because it's the draft he used to curse in November. My son Ben rents a condo downtown and visits on Sundays. His wife, she says ex-wife now, I suppose the court will have the final word, used to visit too. Madison is 32, all lacquered smiles and unbothered poses, an influencer who can turn a trash can into an edit with the right filter. She prefers white interiors and men who answer sure to everything. It is an old truth that intelligent people recognize manipulation later than we should, because we keep assuming a misunderstanding before we permit malice. I called Ben first. "Hey, Mom," he said, voice too bright. "You okay? I was about to text. Did you see it?" I asked. "See what?" "The gallery." He went quiet. No background noise. No Madison. No blender. No podcast murmuring in the open plan life they bought together. "I saw it," he admitted. "I was going to bring it up on Sunday. Wasn't sure how you'd take it." How I'd take that your father's painting just sold for more than this house is worth when I'm looking at that painting right now on the floor of our attic? "Mom," he began carefully, "maybe there's some confusion in your—" "Don't," I said. He sighed. "I'm not saying you're confused. I'm saying there are prints or studies or—" "Ben, your father never sold a study without discussing it with me. And the back label in the photo? That's the Avery paper from Carter's shop in '94. He only used that batch for 6 months. He wrote the dates himself in the bottom right corner. There's a nick through the letter Y in Breakwater from when Lila dropped the stack and the metal edge of the flat file caught them. Remember? She was 14 and cried on the stoop for an hour while your father told her accidents happen." Ben said nothing. "Who gave them the painting?" I asked. "Who had access to it long enough to fake the back of the canvas and the label and the nail pattern? Who's been in my house taking photographs of the attic?" "Mom," Ben said softly, "please, let me come over. We can talk." I'm fine, I said. Bring Carter. Carter? He echoed, as if he hadn't expected me to go for the throat. Bring him, or I'll call him myself. I'll call, Ben said quickly. I'll be there in an hour. We hung up, and I stood in the doorway of the attic, breathing the way you breathe when a storm is close, slow, deliberate, pretending you don't hear the far thunder because you still have to get the chairs in off the porch. I took Mark's November downstairs and laid it on the dining table, the one with the scorch mark from the time he set a hot pan down without a trivet. I made coffee. I waited, like the first day after the funeral when everyone kept knocking and the house taught me how to steady a plate with one hand while someone else fell apart. Carter arrived with Ben, which is how I knew my son had told him the truth before Madison could reframe it. If you've ever known a real dealer, not the peacocks, not the sharks, but the ones who love objects more than the performance of owning them, you know the look. Carter came in without preamble, leaned over the canvas like a man greeting an old friend, and brushed the edge of the frame with his knuckle. November, he said softly. For a man who claimed to hate cliché, he sure painted poetry. I brought it down from the attic, I said, after I saw the post. I saw it, he said. Thought my heart was going to walk right out of my chest. Breakwater is a small town, but the internet makes it loud. Is it? Ben began, looking back and forth between us like a boy again. It's his, Carter said immediately. No doubt. The ground layer alone? He glanced at me. Evelyn, may I? Do what you have to, I said. He peered along the stretcher, squinted at the tacking edges, then turned to my son. Who had access to something so specific and a reason to copy it? Carter asked, not unkindly. Ben swallowed. Mom thinks... I don't think, I said. I know who has been in my house with a camera, documenting my husband's work at angles that make authentication easy and soul theft easier. Madison has been staging content here for months. Sunday at my Mail's Victorian. Heirloom chic. She posted the pantry and called it curated. People think that word makes stealing aesthetics legal. Evelyn, Ben murmured. A plea and an apology stitched together. Carter looked at him. Your wife has brought investors to my gallery in the last year, he said, tone neutral. People who asked leading questions about undervalued estates and private opportunities with more appetite than knowledge. I smelled smoke then. I wish I'd gone around with a bucket. What are we saying? Ben asked. That the painting that sold is a fake? That someone copied Dad's work and not just copied, Carter said. Cloned the narrative. The back label in the photo is almost perfect. But Avery changed their watermark in '95. If the paper shows the old watermark in the wrong place relative to the cut, well, it's a seam only a person who's held stacks of the stuff would recognize. Whoever did this is either very, very good or very, very familiar with Benjamin's habits. I thought of Madison at my dining table, where the light is kind, arranging my husband's letters in a fan for a flat lay. I thought of her odd question last month. Did Ben ever tell you if his dad signed back and front or just back? Asked with a careless flick of her hair as if she were inquiring about cake flour. She's been printing things, I said. She bought a large format printer last spring for merch. She has a friend with a pigment press. They brag about color profiles like sailors brag about storms. Ben closed his eyes. Mom, if you're wrong, then I'm the old woman who cried wolf, I said. If I'm right, your father just got used as a ladder by someone who couldn't be troubled to respect the rungs. Carter straightened. The gallery that posted the sale, Harbor Row, they do good work sometimes, but they'll sell anything that glitters. I'll call, request a condition report. They won't share much without the buyer's consent, but if I push on provenance, they'll sing a line or two. And if the buyer is a private collector, I asked, then we find the tail they wag, Carter said. Collectors love to be told they made history. Often they'll tell you too. Ben rubbed his face. What do we do first? I poured coffee for the three of us and spoke evenly, because the only thing that calms a rattled house is a woman who refuses to rattle. First, I said, we photograph everything in this attic that bears your father's hand, every back label, every stretcher, every frame. We document. We create a record that is not a brag, but a boundary. Second, we ask a question. How did Madison pay for the Tahoe she drove up in last month when you told me you were worried about the mortgage? Ben flinched. She said brand deals hit. Sometimes they do, I said. Sometimes the brand is theft. He didn't defend her. He is a good man who prefers smooth water. He has learned late that smooth water hides riptides best. By sundown, Carter had spoken to the gallery director, who sounded rehearsed until Carter mentioned the watermark. Then there was a pause, the kind that opens a trapdoor, and a promise to email something in confidence. Ben brought down 3 more canvases we'd stashed long ago, an unfinished portrait of our daughter Lila at 15, the ferry on a March morning, the pair he hated but I love because he let me keep the ugly fruit. I cooked stew. The 3 of us ate standing at the island like workers in a storm. When Ben left, Carter stayed. He sipped his whiskey slow, as if it were conversation. "Do you want me to say it aloud?" he asked gently. "The thing you already know." "Say it," I said. "Your daughter-in-law has been selling reproductions of your husband's work," Carter said. "She's found a way to make them convincing enough to pass the first glance and brazen enough to keep walking when the second glance comes. She has either forged or coached the back labels, the frames, the nail patterns. She's leveraged access for authority. She is part of a ring, or she will be soon, because every successful theft gets hungry." I had been waiting all day to feel hysteria. It didn't come. Instead, a low, clean heat spread from somewhere under my ribs to the back of my throat. I have seen boys steady their hands after a skateboard fall and girls stare down a teacher who belittled them. I have taught 13-year-olds to see the difference between imitation and voice. In the end, the voice always tells on us. Madison's voice was a chirp that insisted it was a song. "What do we do next?" I asked. "Aside from photographs." Carter set his glass down. "We call the FBI," he said. "Art crime is not just for Europe. The art crime team out of Boston is real. They will not be amused." "And Ben?" I asked. "Ben needs to choose who he is," Carter said. "But you already know that." I did. I slept with the attic door open for the first time since Mark died. The house creaked in the cold, and the ocean made its old promises. In the morning, I called the number Carter gave me. I expected to reach a voicemail or a polite receptionist. Instead, a woman picked up on the second ring and said, "Special Agent Lopez." I told her my name. I told her my husband's name. I told her the headline that had put heat in my bones. "Harbor Row," she repeated, writing. I could hear the scratch. "We know the gallery. You're saying the painting they sold yesterday is a forgery. I'm saying the unknown Parker is the work my husband abandoned and the story someone else stole. And you have the original. In my dining room. Don't move it further," she said. "We'll come to you. This morning." "You come to a lot of widows?" I asked before I could help it. "We come to people with receipts," she said dryly. "Do you have those?" "I've been a public school teacher for 32 years, I said. "I have more documentation than God." She laughed, quick and unguarded, then sobered. "We'll be there by 11. Don't post about it. Don't confront anyone yet. The first rule of catching a thief is letting them think they're unseen." "I have been invisible for long enough," I said. "Then this part will be easy," she said. Agent Lopez arrived with a partner named Freeman, who had the pleasant opacity of a man who has listened to a lot of lies. They wore suits that tried not to be intimidating and shoes that had walked real miles. I made tea because coffee makes me blunt, and I wanted to be exact. They examined November. They examined the drop cloth. They took my phone in a clear plastic folder and asked permission to scroll my photos and Madison's public posts. Lopez paused at a video Madison had made last spring, fluttery piano swelling under footage of my staircase. "I grew up without a grandmother," she read from the caption. "So I adopt places that feel like one. Sunday serenity at the Victorian." Freeman looked at me. "She's been filming here often?" "Sometimes with permission," I said. "Sometimes by asking Ben while I was at the grocer, which is permission only if you believe the house belongs to whoever holds the list." Lopez nodded. "We'll need to see the attic," she said. I led them up. The air was the cold of old wood. Lopez stood in the middle and turned slowly, cataloging. She looked like I do in a museum when I am trying to make sure a student doesn't miss the thing that will change their life. "You're organized," she said. "My husband was. I learned to be." I pointed. That stack is the small coastal works, most never finished. That box is sketches. Those 3 are portraits, our daughter Lila, and 2 commissioned a lifetime ago by people who never picked them up. He hated doing commissions after those. He said if he wanted to paint strangers, he'd join the police. Freeman crouched by a crate. May I? Please. He lifted the corner and whistled very softly. Your husband was modest. He had the fatal flaw of being more talented than ambitious, I said. Which is to say he was a good man. May I photograph the backs? Lopez asked. Labels, nail patterns, stretcher bars, everything. Yes. They worked quickly, the way people do when they know the light is changing. When they were done, Lopez closed her notebook and said, Mrs. Parker, Evelyn, who do you trust besides your son and Mr. Carter? Lila, I said immediately. My daughter. She lives in Portland. She's a baker who forgets to add sugar sometimes because she cares too much about the crumble. Call her, Lopez said. Ask her to stay with you for a few days. We don't know what we're stepping on yet. We do know that if someone is prepared to sell a forgery for 7 figures, they'll want to control the narrative when it shakes. You think Madison would, what? Threaten me? I think Madison believes the internet can make her bulletproof, Lopez said. And I think the first time people like that encounter a wall that isn't made of comments, they lean not with their shoulder but with their friends. I called Lila. She said, I'm already in the car, before I could finish hi. Bring an overnight bag, I said, and your sense of humor. It doesn't fit, she said, and hung up. By afternoon, the email from Harbor Row had arrived, a high-resolution PDF of their condition report meant for insurance, stamped confidential. Carter forwarded it without comment. Lopez read it, lips pressed tight. They'd included ultraviolet photos showing crocolure and varnish patterns engineered to mimic age. They'd matched the signature with eerie fidelity. They'd rubbed fine dust into the back of the canvas where 100 hands would never see, then photographed it like a trophy. Whoever did this, Freeman said, has either handled your husband's work intimately or studied someone who has. Madison has been friendly with a man named Chase, I said, memory clicking into place. He calls himself a printmaker, which is a word that has suffered enough. He runs a small studio in an old cannery behind the yoga place. He offered to help me catalog last winter. I said no. Lopez made a note. We'll talk to him. Quietly. Evelyn, do not call Madison. Do not post. Let us set the table. Special agent, I said. What if she's already gone to get the silver? Lopez smiled slightly. Then we'll be there to watch her carry the tray. I did not sleep that night either, but it wasn't fear that woke me. It was velocity. There are years that sit, and then there are days that tilt. The house was tilting. I walked the floors like a captain. Around 3 a.m, I found myself in the pantry, hand on the jar of cinnamon sticks Mark loved to chew when he was trying not to smoke. I broke one and let the scent carry me back to the first time I saw him paint, a winter day with too much sky and not enough money, and a man who made a blue so clean I wanted to drink it. By daylight, Breakwater had opinions. The gallery post had traveled. So proud of our local legacy, one comment read. Always knew Parker was undervalued, wrote another, as if undervalued were a moral category. Someone tagged Madison. She replied with a heart. Lila arrived with a loaf of bread wrapped in a kitchen towel and the face of a daughter who has been worried all the way up Route 1. She hugged me hard. Show me the thing they think they stole, she said. I showed her November. She set a fingertip by the place where the paint rose just slightly, a tiny ridge Mark always meant to sand and never did. There, she said, Dad's bad temper. We laughed at the same moment, and then we cried at the same moment. Which is how you know a family is still a family after it's been told it should be otherwise. By noon, Lopez and Freeman were back with a third agent I hadn't met. Dolan, who had the look of a man who keeps his jokes in a safe for when morale needs cash. They spread photos on my dining table like cards. One photo showed Madison at the cannery studio, laughing with her head thrown back. Chase, the printmaker, stood beside her, stretching a canvas on a new, clean stretcher frame. She's not just a client, Lopez said. She's a partner. How can you tell? Lila asked. Look at the placement. Dolan said. She's hands-on, not a guest, and he lets her touch the canvas. Men like that don't let anyone touch the canvas unless they're in business together. We have questions about his inks, Freeman added. Pigment profiles can be traced if they're sloppy. He's not sloppy, but we only need one lazy batch. What about the sale? I asked. Can you get the buyer's information? We'll get it, Lopez said, but we need to build from your side clean. Once they know we're looking, they'll start deleting. Madison made it easy. At 2:30, she posted a story from a hair salon, a slow pan across a mirror, the words, "Big day tonight," in a script that looks like forgiveness. She tagged Harbor Row. Lopez didn't smile, but the room did. "Let's go," she said. They didn't let me come. I argued like a woman who has found her voice again and doesn't want to hand it back. Lopez put a hand on my arm. "You've done your part better than most," she said softly. "We need you for the part after." "The part after what?" I asked. "The part after the cuffs click," she said. They left. Lila and I sat with our hands around our cups and counted the seconds like women on a labor ward. Ben called at 5:27. "Mom," he said, breathless. "They're here. The FBI is at Harbor Row. Madison is... She's what?" "Smiling like it's a stunt," he said, then crying like it's a story, then screaming like a person who doesn't understand what a federal means. "Where are you?" I asked. "In the back," he said. "Carter's with me. He told me to stay away from the front because he said I shouldn't have to see it." I thought of my son at 8, hiding in the curtained space under the stairs when he thought thunder could find him by name. "Come home," I said. "Bring Carter. Bring your fear if you must. We'll feed it and send it to bed." When they arrived, it was dark. The harbor bells were moody. Carter looked 10 years older and 10 pounds lighter, which is what a conscience looks like after carrying a town's secrets for a day. "They took Madison," he said without preamble, "and Chase, and a third man from the back office I've never seen. They secured the canvases on the wall under warrants I didn't want to read." "And the buyer?" I asked. "Out of town," he said, "but reachable. Harbor Row sang the song. The buyer will sing to save face." Ben sank into a chair. He had the gray look people get when the story they authorized with their silence gets printed in a font they can't read. "Mom," he said, "I don't know how to apologize to you enough." "Then don't try yet," I said. "Work with them. Tell the truth. The truth is a slow tool, but it does its job." He put his head in his hands. Lila brought him water. We were a family at a table again, the way families are when the facade finally cracks and the real structure holds. 2 days later, Agent Lopez returned with answers. She sat on my porch swing and watched the harbor with me as if we were two women discussing the weather instead of betrayal. "Madison was planning to scale," she said. "The November sale was a proof of concept. She had a list of 5 more discoveries lined up, all mapped to your attic or Carter's back room, angles, label mimics, fake wormholes on frames. She had emails with Chase outlining percentages. She had a spreadsheet titled Authenticity Narratives. She's not a genius, but she's efficient." "Who taught her where to look?" I asked softly. "Some of it she learned here," Lopez said. "She took pictures of your husband's labels. She traced the Avery watermark. But the method? That's Chase. And the hustle behind the method? That's a man we arrested at the cannery. He calls himself an art advisor." "What's the charge?" "For Madison? Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, trafficking in counterfeit goods, and, if we can tie in cross-state sales, the interstate transport of stolen property, even if the property was intellectual. For Chase, more. For the advisor, we'll see. They're chatty when they think they can sell each other." She paused. "There's more," she said. "Say it," I said. "Madison has notes about capacity," Lopez said. "She was researching the process to have you declared unable to manage your affairs. She had a draft petition on her laptop, care of a lawyer who should lose his license. She had collected evidence. Your lost keys, your repeated grocery lists, pictures of the same pantry shelf on different days annotated with comments about confusion. She had recorded phone calls where you paused before answering and labeled them cognitive." For a moment, I couldn't hear the harbor. I could only hear the silence of a woman being defined by someone who thought a pause was a confession. "She wanted the house," I said. "She wanted the house, the cachet, and the freedom to inventory your attic without asking permission," Lopez said. She was going to frame it as care. She had already pitched the story to some brand partners, navigating elder care with grace, with a lowercase g. I had to laugh then, the hard laugh again, because if I didn't, I would take the swing down with my hands. What happens now? I asked. Now, Lopez said, you get to decide what justice looks like for you. We'll charge what we can charge. The U.S. Attorney will decide what sticks. You can make a statement or not. You can sit in the front row and look like the matriarch you are, or you can sit on your porch and watch the tide come in and keep something only for yourself. Can one do both? I asked. People like you do both all the time, she said. I made a statement. I did not stand at a podium. I sat at my dining table with November behind me and Lila beside me and said I loved a man who painted like breathing. I said some people think love is a ladder you climb to a better view, but real love is a house you mend. I said I had been an art teacher for 3 decades, and if any of my students had handed in a copy, I would have given them a chance to start again, if they had admitted it. But that doing it for money with an old woman's dignity as the collateral is not a mistake. It's theft. The town woke up like a dog hearing boots. Some people were quiet in public and loud in their group chats. Some people said they had always suspected Madison was a striver with empty pockets. Others posted sun-drenched photos of wine and wrote prayers. A woman with a microphone from the city station asked me how it felt to be vindicated. I told her I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Then I told her I also felt young. It surprises people when older women say that. It shouldn't. But I watched 3 camera operators nod, like men who had seen their mothers remember the first time they told someone no. The buyer of the November forgery came forward through a lawyer. He claimed to be shocked. Perhaps he was. He offered to cooperate and to return the work for restitution. He had also bought 2 other Parkers through a private introducer who owed a favor to a favor. Both were in transit to be examined. Both would turn out to be machine-assisted prints, aged with a DIY pride that made the conservators grin in spite of themselves. A week later, I received a letter from an attorney I did not know, enclosing a petition drafted but never filed, seeking to have me declared incapacitated to manage my own financial affairs. The letter said the attorney declined to participate after further review of facts. The subtext said the FBI sticker on the cannery door had cured his curiosity. Ben sat with me while I read. He had moved into his old room temporarily, which turned out to be good for the both of us. I woke to heavy steps in the hall again, and he learned that stairs announced the truth about your knees. "Mom," he said, "I can't ask you to forgive me quickly. I stood by while she made a story out of you. I didn't recognize the plot. That's a kind of failure they don't write sympathy cards for." "The good thing about being a teacher," I said, "is you learn to grade effort and improvement as well as result. You were late to class. You're here now. Don't be late again." He smiled the unhandsome, real smile he had as a child. "Yes, ma'am." Lopez came by less often. When she did, she brought updates in sensible shoes. "Chase flipped," she said on her last visit. "He's given us names for 2 other rings. Madison thinks she can negotiate, but her texts are unkind to her story. She's looking at time, Evelyn." "How much?" 5 to 8 with cooperation, Lopez said. "More if the judge has a parent who was scammed." "I don't want her to disappear," I said honestly. "I want her to understand, but I suppose that's not your department." "Understanding is mostly an internal job," Lopez said. "Prison can make a woman listen, but it can't make her hear." "What happens to the other families?" I asked. "The people who bought lies because they wanted to believe in sudden discovery?" "We'll help them unwind what they can," she said. "We'll teach them the questions to ask next time." There's often a next time. As long as there's money, there's art crime. As long as there's beauty, there's someone who would rather borrow than build. After she left, the phone rang so much I stopped answering. I chose the calls that felt like letters from students. A woman in Rockland told me her grandson had started helping with her finances, and she wondered if help was supposed to feel like erasure. A man in Brunswick said his sister was curating their mother's antiques to minimize visual noise, and could I recommend a word stronger than no? I told them I'm fond of never. Carter proposed something small and true, a quiet show of Mark's unfinished works, not for sale, with careful labels about process and love. We hung them without trick frames. We placed the drop cloth in a case beside the door like a relic. When people came, they spoke more softly than the gallery had prepared for. They lingered by the ferry in March, as if a line in the sky could be a promise not to lie again. A local reporter asked if I wanted to start a foundation for artist estate protection. I said foundations require committees, and I've had enough committees for a lifetime. Then I made a list on a yellow pad in my kitchen, 3 columns labeled Teach, Guard, and Mend. Under Teach, I wrote down the questions to ask a gallery, the way to recognize a label that lies, the anatomy of a stretcher bar, and how to catalog your own work with a pen that won't smudge. Under Guard, I wrote the phone number for the art crime team and Carter's cell, and the sentence, "You are never being rude when you say I need to think." Under Mend, I wrote bread, and porch, and Lila's laugh, and Ben's heavy feet, and the draft under the front door I finally fixed with a rolled towel, because some things deserve to be simple. Spring leaned into summer. The gulls got cocky. Breakwater's tourists ordered lobster rolls and asked for forks. Ben filed for divorce. He chose a chair at the dining table and started sitting in it like a man who knows which furniture is his and which stories aren't. We heard the sentence on a Wednesday in July, the kind of day New Englanders pretend to dislike because we believe we deserve something harsher. Madison stood with her attorney in a navy suit that made her look like a curated version of remorse. She did not look for me. I did not look away. The judge spoke with the clipped patience of a woman who has driven long roads in bad weather. "I am less interested in your follower count," she said to Madison, "than in your capacity for self-deception. Your petition regarding Mrs. Parker's capacity is an offense independent of the criminal code. You attempted to appropriate a life by narrating it out of a woman's hands. If you are lucky, prison will teach you how to hold something without taking it. 5 years, eligible for programs, restitution with teeth." Chase got more. The advisor got the number he deserved. Afterward, in the hallway, a young reporter with a camera asked if I felt closure. I told her closure is for zip ties. She looked startled. Then she grinned. "Can I quote you?" she asked. "You will anyway," I said, and we both laughed because it was true. The gallery show became a permanent corner, a small room where teenagers take selfies with the label that says, "Unfinished, like a good life." Sometimes I sit on the bench in there and eavesdrop on couples. They always think they're being original. It's charming. Once in a while someone says, "I didn't know a woman his age could be that brave," and I let myself feel pretty. On a Sunday in late August, Carter showed up with a woman I'd never met. Gray hair like a storm cloud, and eyes like someone who's paid attention. "This is Natalie," he said. "She runs the Community Arts Center in Portland. She'd like your help with a program we're calling Keepers, for artists and their families on how to protect work before grief makes amateurs out of all of us." "I don't do committees," I warned. "Workshops," Natalie said. 4 Saturdays. We pay you. You eat cookies and scare people politely." "I can do that," I said. She glanced toward the harbor. "It must be strange," she said softly, "to have your home turned into a plot." "It's a house," I said. "It never minded being a stage." That September, Ben brought someone to dinner. He looked sheepish the way men do when they're happy and know it might look like forgetting. Her name was Anna. She laughed with her mouth open. She spoke to me like I was fluent in my own life. When she asked for seconds, I felt the kind of silly joy that told me I'm still built for company. She noticed the draft under the door and stuck her scarf under it without asking. Later, when she left, she didn't take it back. That seemed like an omen you can trust. We talk a lot about revenge in stories like this, as if the only way to heal is to watch someone else bleed. But revenge is impatient. Justice is satisfying, but it arrives on someone else's calendar. What kept me breathing were smaller verbs: keep, teach, mend, laugh. The night before the first workshop, I sat on the attic floor with November in my lap. The gulls had gone quiet. The harbor had that exact electric calm it gets before a storm, when the boats tug their ropes like dogs in a dream. I broke one of Mark's cinnamon sticks and let the past sit with me kindly. Then I spoke aloud to the man who taught me that a good line is a promise you keep with your hand. "They took your name and used it like a coupon," I said. "We took it back." I carried November downstairs and hung it over the mantel in the room Madison once staged as heirloom. It looked less perfect there than it did against the white wall of a gallery. It looked more like us. People wrote to me, some famous, some ordinary. A museum asked if they could include our case in a training. The attorney who sent the petition wrote again, this time with an apology that would have been better spoken to his own mirror. A girl in 9th grade sent a charcoal drawing of my porch with little notes explaining where the light made the wood look like velvet. I put it on the fridge. The Friday before Christmas, Lila brought over a cake she claimed tasted like forgiveness, and mostly did. We ate slices on the couch with our feet under an ugly blanket that used to embarrass me when guests came. Ben put on the tree lights. Anna hung the last ornament, a small glass gull. The house sighed, the way wood does when it warms. My phone buzzed on the counter. For the first time in months, I didn't look. Some invitations deserve to wait. We toasted with tea like New Englanders who understand the math of cold. Later, when the house was dark and the harbor bells took their turn at the night, I stood in the doorway to the dining room and looked at November over the mantel. It is a strange grace to be old enough to see your own life from a distance and close enough to touch it still. People ask me what I learned. They want a sentence they can tape to the inside of a bathroom mirror. I suppose mine is this. If someone tries to narrate you out of your own story, open the window and let the harbor in. It will remind you what you sound like. Then speak. Speak until the sound you make feels like a house again. In the spring, the workshops got noisy. People brought their mothers. Teenagers asked earnest questions about signatures and moral rights. I showed them my husband's drop cloth and said, "This is as important as anything he made. It's the witness." They nodded like people who had found a secret door. Agent Lopez came to one session and sat in the back taking the kind of notes cops take, broad but precise. Afterward, she hugged me in the quick, professional way of a woman who doesn't hug often. "You were right about being invisible," she said. "It helped." "I hated it," I admitted. "That's why you didn't stay," she said. I saw Madison once more, not in person, on a small screen, a clip someone sent of an interview she did from inside a program room where the walls are beige on purpose. She wore a sweatshirt. Her hair was the kind of ponytail that admits it is not the point. She spoke about choices and pressures, the words women use when they are practicing accountability like scales. She didn't say my name. That was fine. My name fit better in my own house. People expect a final twist, a secret under the floorboards, a confession in a letter found behind a drawer. I can offer something smaller and, I think, more durable. In June, a storm came through that knocked out the power for 12 hours. The town did what towns do, checked on the oldest neighbor, texted the guy with the chainsaw, found candles in drawers. At dusk, when the sky went the color of old pearls, Ben came in with a flashlight and a grin. "Want to see something?" he asked, and I followed him outside. The power was still gone. The harbor houses were silhouettes. Above them, the sky cleared in a way I hadn't seen since I was a girl. The stars were so many, I felt greedy. "It's the same sky Dad painted," Ben said quietly. "We just forgot to turn off the other lights." I stood there beside my son, and for once I didn't have to say the right thing. We let the quiet hold us up. Somewhere inside the house, a painting hung above a mantel in a room people had tried to rename. It didn't mind. It knew its own title. A week after the storm, a package arrived with no return address. Inside, wrapped in butcher paper and humility, was a small painting, a harbor at dawn by a hand that was not my husband's, but had learned from him honestly. There was a note. "I started over," it said. "No ladders, just wood and light." I hung it by the pantry, across from the jar of cinnamon sticks. Sometimes, when I make tea in the morning, I stand in the doorway between the two and think of all the things people try to sell when they don't believe they can make something themselves. Then I go upstairs and open the attic and set out the chairs for the next workshop. The gulls call. The harbor breathes. The house remembers our names. You asked for a new story. Mine is not about punishment. It's about returning things to the rooms where they belong. It's about the moment you realize the person narrating your life to make it marketable is small and your life is not. It's about a widowed art teacher in a coastal town who learned finally to say the word no with such precision it sounded like a door closing softly on a room no one had the right to enter. If you are listening because someone has been narrating you out of your own rooms, I have a simple assignment. Go into the attic. Bring down the thing you thought you were saving for later. Lay it on the table and look at it with the lights on. Say its name. Then call someone who will say it back. That's the whole trick. That's the end and the beginning. And when the harbor bells ring at night, answer them once, in your own voice, so you remember what it feels like to be the person in the story who hears herself.